Glad you're here. All right, Ed, I assume you can hear me. I think we're all set. And I guess it looks like maybe we already are recording, yeah? So I will welcome everyone to the Diversity, Equity, and Anti-Racism Subcommittee on Monday, November 14th at 6 p.m. We are obviously virtual tonight, and this meeting can be viewed on the WRSD live stream link. So welcome everybody. I'd like to call this meeting to order, and it is 6:04. And I have the document up and running for the minutes. So I will take the minutes and then I will send them to Randy. Since we don't currently have a vice chair, but it's on our agenda for tonight, we will move forward with a vice chair. But before we do, we have the approval of June 7th minutes. So I would like to entertain a motion to approve the minutes of January 7th, 2022, which was our last meeting.
So moved.
Thank you. I will take Sherry as the maker of the motion and Malia as the second on that motion. And it looks like we need to do a roll call vote since we are in remote session. So Deidre?
I'm going to abstain. I don't think I was at that meeting. So
Okay. That's Deidre. And Malia?
Yes.
And Sue? Can you hear me? You can give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. So, oh, there we lost Sue. All right, so we'll wait and see if she comes back on. But I vote yes. Chair votes yes. And the motion passes. Sherry, I don't know if you need to vote. I suppose I could have asked you to vote. Do you want to vote? I don't know if you can.
I can vote and I don't have to vote. I abstain.
Okay. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
Hey, Sue. Thumbs up, thumbs down? Thumbs up. All right, I'll take it. Thank you. All right, so the motion passes. So now item number 3 is our election to a vice chair. And just to give you a little background for those of you, we did have Krista Bennett serving as vice chair. She is unable at this point to continue meeting with us. And so she is no longer on this subcommittee. So we need a new vice chair. So I will entertain any motions for vice chair. Don't jump all at once. Well, I would like to nominate Sue Valentine for.
Now, Laura, this is the second time you've done this to me. But that's fine, because I was going to volunteer if nobody else stepped forward. So.
All right. Well, thank you for accepting the nomination. Are there any other nominations? We have a contentious vote to have here. Okay, seeing no other nominations, then we'll go through a, do we need a second for this? I'm not sure.
I'll second.
Okay. So Laura and Malia second, so then I will do a roll call vote. And I will look for Deidre again.
Shapiro, yes.
All right, thank you. And Malia?
Yes.
Sherry?
Abstain.
Okay. And Sue?
Abstain.
And I vote yes. So welcome to the job, Sue, and thank you very much for being willing to take this on.
Okay, thank you. Looking forward to it.
Excellent. I love your enthusiasm. All right. So, with that, we haven't met in quite some time for those of you that are tuning in tonight and seeing our link. We have not met since June 7th. We've had some issues with getting together and meeting, but we are fully powered now and ready to move forward. And we have John Kroll and Jim Riley who are with us tonight. And so before we get into the meat of our agenda, I was just wondering if either of you wanted to share any thoughts or updates, and let us know how the year's going so far.
Yeah, sure. So, and I'll go quickly because I know Dr. Riley has a facilities meeting to get to at 6:30. But I want to just kind of give you like an overarching picture of where we're kind of thinking that there are some entry points around the topics for the subcommittee. And one of those is the idea of like putting on different lenses when we're looking at data. And so Deputy Superintendent Daly and I drafted, we kind of stole, I'm going to just share it with you in a couple of seconds here, but we stole a concept that Panorama actually really utilizes a lot when they're helping districts look at their SEL data, but it's a methodology that you can use, and it doesn't come from Panorama, they just kind of use it, but it's a methodology you can use for any types of data. So it's just kind of putting on a couple of different lenses when you're looking at it, and it doesn't have to be SEL data, it could be MCAS data, it could be whatever. So I'm going to just, if I can, share my screen. Is that okay?
Sure. Do you have ability to?
Yeah, well, we'll see.
All right.
There it is. So it's called the ladder of inference. And so is that showing up okay?
Yes.
So the idea behind this, and this is like, this could be like a 45-minute long conversation, but like the 2-minute synopsis of this is, it's just walking up the different rungs of a ladder when you're looking at an available pool of data. So for example, if you take a look at, you know, an SEL data from Panorama, and you might look at sense of belonging. And, you know, as I highlighted at school committee, like that's something that we really struggle with, particularly in grades 6 through 12 and more with 9 through 12. So instead of just looking at that and thinking like, oh, that's because, you know, we were out of school for a bit in the pandemic, and, you know, the students don't really feel like they belong. It's like, well, let's take a couple of steps back before we kind of get to that belief or understanding point where we're going to start moving forward on action. And let's really think about like, what are our observations first? And then what filter or lens am I using this data what filter or lens am I using when I'm looking at this data? And it's kind of being more thoughtful about our approach when we're making judgments about what the data may or may not be showing us. But I highlight that for this group because it's going to allow us to use different lenses in a really objective way and filter out through when we're looking at data together as an admin team, or when the principals are doing it with their building. And I think that it's going to be a really good opportunity. So we're trying this protocol out. We just tried it with some MCAS data, and we're going to continue to use it all year. But that was just something I wanted to highlight real quick. I'm going to stop presenting just so we have. All right. So that was one piece, you know, in terms of, you know, if we're looking for how to solve equity issues, we have to be able to find those equity issues. And so that'll help us do that as a collective group with the administrators. Dr. Riley, I'll turn it over to you to see if you wanted to add anything. I didn't want to take all the time.
Nope. You know what I'm just going to add, John? I'm going to add seek to find. And so I think we need to be active and deliberate in the process, and that, you know, and just segregate data and look at it from a variety of lenses as well. So I think that's the big thing. I think it's easy for us, and I don't know, I'm new to the district. And so, but to thoughtfully apply those lenses like you're talking about, and to make sure that we're digging below the surface, not like you're talking about just assuming things or things that jump out to us, but really applying the lens to everything. Whenever we have data, having certain protocols where we're looking for the experience of all students, especially those where we traditionally don't think of or have in the past. So that's about it. But thank you. And that's awesome, John.
So,
Go ahead.
John, I just had a question. Who has access to that data, and is that used, across all schools at different levels?
The data itself.
Yes.
So are you referring to the SEL data particularly?
No, I'm talking about the Panorama program.
Yeah, so that's the SEL work. So
Oh,
the principals all have access to it minimally. However, each building is in a little bit of a different place around the Panorama usage. And actually, I think we have some buildings, and I'll use Chris Lebrecht's Choxit as an example. Like, they're really pretty far ahead in terms of working building wide on digging into that data. And then we have different ways in continuums. People are kind of at different points in the continuum of using it or not using it or really understanding it. And so we're doing a training with the principals on the 17th of this week, so that's Thursday, to do a little bit of a deeper dive on how to use the platform so that we can be more thoughtful around rolling it out district-wide to, teachers and counselors and school psychologists. And we also had a training for special ed folks, teachers and special ed folks, psychologists and counselors on the 8th during the November 8th PD day to kind of get into that data and utilize it a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. That sounds wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Malia?
Okay. When you mentioned Panorama, it reminded me of something which I'll have more detail on soon. But one of the workshops I went to at the conference actually mentioned that there is an ability, apparently for free, on the Panorama website to do a very high level, like DEI climate survey of a couple districts. They gave the presentation, said they used it as a baseline for like their staff, just and students, but there's a staff version and a student version. And I said, oh, I wonder if we know about that. And they said, oh, it's free on their website. So I didn't know if you guys knew about that, but I wanted to mention it because it was, they showed it to us. It seemed really, it seemed like something we might want to use even before we dig deeply into this work, because it seemed very like high level and not super threatening, but a good way to get a baseline before you dive in. And it's a tool we already have. So I said, if they could use it for free without paying for Panorama, we probably have access to it in some way. So I just wanted to mention that since you brought it up, because I thought it sounded like a very useful tool.
I don't know what the free version looks like, but I can tell you that we do know of it and we do utilize it. So we already survey the students on climate. And Dr. Ali and I and the team, the admin team at Central Office, have talked about using the survey to survey our staff members as well.
That's great. As I said, I'll have more detail when I do my report, but it just is on my list. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks so much for that information. I appreciate that too. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with us before we go on?
You know what, Laura, I just would want to add that I'm glad we're meeting. This is important work. And I think, we've talked a little bit before, but John and I have as well. This is something we're committed to as a district administration. So we're happy, and it's helpful, to be honest, when you engage in this work, to have the support of school committee. And so excited that this group is getting together and bringing some much needed discussion to this. And at times, honestly, we always can have our own focus, but it's also good to get the focus of the community. So, appreciate all the work.
Thank you. And we do appreciate all the work and the attention that you folks are bringing in the the fresh perspectives, I think, too, that the enthusiasm that you have for this work. So I appreciate that. On our agenda, we have a number of items. One is a item that we've had kind of lingering for a long time, and I hope that through our discussions tonight we can hopefully come to a resolution, and that is item number 4 on our agenda. And then we have a few policies that I'd like us to take a look at. So, let's move on to item number 4, and it's to review and finalize the draft memo about gender equity language and policies. So I'd entertain a motion to approve the memo, and I believe that was circulated on our agenda through our links. Approve the memo and recommend to management the distribution of the memo to all subcommittees.
So moved.
Do we have a second for that?
Second.
Thank you, Sherry. Leah, do you want to speak to this?
Sure. Since I was involved in writing it, absolutely. So this is carried over from last year, but I believe we thought it would make sense to bring it up again with this committee since it's a different group. But we approved it last year. We just didn't act on it because the policy, we decided it was better at that time after the policy had passed, and it did not pass, of course, until this fiscal year and the school committee entity this summer. So that's why it is still lingering. Basically, when we started looking at language and our policies last year, I went through every one of our policies a lot. Some of them we were able to correct easily in the process of revising, but there are quite a few that were outdated. Not all. I was pleased that there weren't that, it wasn't all of them because language has evolved over the years. And a lot of them used gender neutral terms like the principal or the superintendent instead of he or she. But there are still a fair number that still used various language that we thought was not in agreement with our new policy for gender equity, and we wanted to make sure that we were being inclusive in our policies as well. And so there are, the memo kind of speaks for itself. It's really just to raise awareness of this and ask that other subcommittee chairs consider them. There are 2 documents linked to it. They're not the prettiest documents, but basically I went through all of our policies and made notes about where they had issues that I could easily see. There are non-personnel policies, and then there are personnel policies, because the personnel policies are a whole different category, haven't been touched, most of them, for over 15 years, and probably have a lot of legal changes that need made as well, I would guess. So that's why they are separated out, because the other ones are more easily accessible to most of our committees that are doing work, and the personnel ones, I'm not really sure who is handling those, but we thought those are a different type of policy. So that's why there's 2 separate lists to help kind of make it easier. Also, because almost every one of the non-personnel or of the personnel policies has some language that's not gender neutral, because they're so old, honestly. So that's why we have a link to them, though, as a starting point to help people out and also raise awareness of it when people are creating new policies. So hopefully that makes sense. I guess my main question is who it would be from, because when we wrote it, it was from myself and Asima. I was the vice chair at the time, and Asima was the chair, but she was not in attendance often, and so she asked me if I could work on it, which I did. So I guess my main question is who it should be from, but it could be easily from our chair and vice chair. That's the only major change I thought of, but if you all have other things to suggest, please feel free.
Well, in looking at the memo, there were a couple of things that came to mind. One being, and this is kind of a broader issue, But in going to the conference, it seemed like people were using diversity, equity, and inclusion pretty consistently. And I'm wondering if we might want to consider making that change as well. And they were using the, DEI as an acronym for that. I think racism has become very political, and it's a very negative term. And I think this committee, we want to be very positive. We want to step forward. It's a really important committee. We've got a lot of great work ahead of us. And I just think that if we use inclusion, that's just a much more positive word. I don't know how anybody else feels about that. And again, I think it would be consistent with terminology that's being used elsewhere. And then the other thing I was wondering about, when it said, I realized that depending upon how we vote, there's going to be two different memos, but with language that may not, that seemed a little open-ended, like may not what? May not align, may not agree, may not support, whatever. And that's a sentence that's repeated in the second paragraph too. And I also am wondering, we really don't want people to be bogged down in revising a million different policies. I think moving forward, or if it's something that could be easily revised, but to have every policy reviewed and voted on and discussed, that could total a lot of time. And I really feel that we need to be focusing on more important issues. So moving forward, yes, I think this should be a consideration with new policies. If it's an old policy that can be easily corrected, but it's talking about what? Legal? Doesn't it say that? Our attorney, the opinion of our attorney that they would require formal review and revision to change the language. So does that mean that every policy would have to come before the school committee for final approval?
So there's a lot there, Sue, and I want to try and take your thoughts into kind of one at a time, and also Malia's as well. So firstly, with Malia talking about updating to the vice chair and the chair in terms of who this is from, I think is something that we would certainly be able to update. Sue, in terms of the terminology, I think that you're referring to, like the diversity, equity, and inclusion versus our subcommittee name as it currently stands is equity, diversity, and anti-racism. Right. I think that's a worthy thing to note, and I have noted that myself, just in hearing what other districts are doing and what's coming through from the state in terms of their language. And I think that you're spot on with that. But I don't know that we're in the position to be able to change our name of the subcommittee, because that's sort of like a major decision from the district, right? Because we are a subcommittee that was named in its entirety by the school district, the school district committee, I should say. And with the new bylaws, it seems like perhaps that would be a moot point anyways, depending on how the bylaws get rewritten, in terms of minimizing the number of committees. But in terms of the work, I think that the work is good. And I think using the terminology that, bye Jim, thank you. I think that moving forward, keeping the eye on, equity and diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think is good vocabulary to use. I would support that. You noted a couple of places, I think, where there was a sentence that needs updating. And of course, we've got two different versions here. One that was drafted with the policy before it was put into place when I say the policy, I'm talking about 6436.1, which has now been adopted a while ago. So the second part is what we're looking to consider, which is that that's already passed, right? And then, to your point of, bogging down the committee with policies, I think, again, if the bylaws get passed as they've been, sort of discussed in the school committee, it sounds like there'll be a policy subcommittee potentially that is working on all things policy and updating, so that we don't end up with policies that are 15 years 15 years old before they get reviewed.
Mhm.
And then talking with legal, I don't think that every single policy has been reviewed by legal. But I think there are certain ones where, like when we did the harassment policy and we did the anti-discrimination policy and those policies, we did consult with legal for those purposes, because there were, certainly specific letters of the law that we needed to address. This is more, the way I see this memo is sort of a reminder to our folks within our committee, the full committee, that we have this policy, and that we are asking folks that when they go through their normal course policy review, to just kind of keep this lens of, language inclusion into, in their mind. And, I wonder if it would be more appropriate here, to not, move this forward, to management, but to have our administration note this conversation. They've certainly committed to this work, and to realize that, that this can be sort of a lens that we keep always in our back, in our mind, to make sure that we're doing this.
Okay, well, Laura, that sounds a lot more reasonable. When the second to the last paragraph says, we ask that you consider updating these policies to include gender neutral language ASAP.
Yeah.
That is, that to me says this is going to be a top priority. You need to do this right away. And, I don't agree with that.
Yeah. Fair enough.
So, Malia, how do you feel about that since you drafted this? I mean, do you think we should tweak it a little bit? I think we're all in agreement it's necessary, but I think maybe the language could be tweaked a little bit.
Well, the part of the one sentence you pointed out that was incorrect, I totally agree with that, because there were 2 paragraphs depending on when we introduced this originally, and I think I probably was intending to delete one and I just didn't. I don't know, but in any case, the one that is incomplete is not applicable anyways, because we have passed the policy. Hold on, I'm sorry. Okay, so that part's easy. The ASAP, yeah, probably we could change, or get rid of the ASAP. I think when we created it, and the discussions at the time, the intent was, there are 2 things. The first thing was the part about legal requiring a full reading of each policy was because originally we asked them if we could just change the pronouns in a lot of the cases, and it would not require a full reading and revision. And the attorneys clarified, no, that actually counts still as a revision, and you have to go through the 2 readings, etc. And so at that point, our goal was not to, at least historically, was not to require all of these policies to be redone just for that, but to point this out, that this may be an issue with these policies that we have noted, and just bring them to the attention of other chairs and the rest of the committee, so that when they do consider policies that they need to revise, they will have that lens and that awareness that these are some that have some inconsistencies with some of our umbrella policies and need to be looked at some point. I think the ASAP, we can get rid of that, and I would be fine with that still conveying the intent. But I think our intent was certainly not to make people bring these forward just for that, but to put them on their radar that these are things, in some cases that might be the only change they need. Maybe they're based on a law and just that has changed. And so some of them are fairly simple changes. Some of them may require more complicated revisions because they haven't been revised for a long time. But our point was not to make everyone go out and revise every one of these policies solely for the gendered language in them, but to put it on their radar that these policies currently have an issue with that. And so they could take that into account when they're looking at policies.
Okay. Thanks for that clarification.
Sherry?
Yeah, I too can see moving from this point forward to update them. Laura and I had talked a while back about the memo format. I would suggest that you guys bring this forth to the full committee and not necessarily just to management, just for transparency. We change positions every year in this committee, and the more people that you have hearing this, the better in my book. And then I would also suggest that you add into your memo that this language gets put into the new document we keep talking about. There's, of course, nothing written yet, but the operation manual, so that this can carry on beyond everyone's terms here.
Deidre? I think you're muted.
Oh, there we go. Now can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. No, Sherry just said what I was going to say, which was, oh yeah, the memo's good. I agree with, what you're saying about taking as soon as possible. I mean, if we want to put some strength and just not take, don't take out as soon as possible, but as you could say something as soon as feasible, or you know what I mean, or something like that. So you're taking out the ASAP, but you're still putting a little bit of urgency around it. I think that there actually is a little bit of urgency around this, because if somebody goes onto the website and reads some of these policies, it just makes us look archaic and not inclusive. The longer that these things are going, the longer that these policies go and have this type of language, it's just, I think it is an important thing, but I also see the point of, there's a lot of policies out there that need to be updated. But to what Sherry was saying was that, this really, should go in front of the full committee, because I think that's another way of making everyone aware of how important we think that this is. So.
Thank you. So in hearing this conversation, it feels like we've still got some work to do on this memo, for lack of a better word. But it even sounds like maybe a memo it is really not what we're looking for, but more just a statement, right? A general statement to the full committee that then gets submitted for the record as a as an important part of the work that we do. So I'm actually thinking that perhaps we need to table this. Table this. I'm not sure exactly how to proceed with this. It feels like we've still got some work to do, and I'm not sure that we're ready to vote on it. And I'm wondering if we want to table this, make some adjustments to the statement till our next meeting, which is, to be determined, but probably in December. And at that point, maybe finalize the statement to then bring to the full committee at the next regular school committee meeting. Is that sounding like a better place for us to land here? Deidre?
Oh, so I just historic, like I'm wondering where the idea of the memo came from. Maybe Malaya, if that was what you were just about to talk from, because like if a memo is the way to make a statement, a formal statement, then yeah, we need a memo. Like I'm wondering how that came about, if it was something that like Daryl had recommended or something like that. So yeah, Malaya, go ahead.
Laura was on the, you were on the committee then too, right? So I don't want to speak for you. I think it's just what we came up with because nothing like this has ever had ever occurred before, and we wanted something in writing, not just verbally. So we did have some documentation of it, but we really didn't know because we've never had anything like any kind of. We don't have operating norms, and we didn't know how else to communicate it. So that's why
what
we
I
have
was.
a memo. I don't know.
Yeah,
what else.
that's what I was just about to say. Like, do we have a policy about writing policies? Like,
No. Well, yes, sort of. That's a complicated topic, actually.
because that's, the bylaws are getting
I don't think we
written.
wanted
Okay,
it to be a
but
policy. But you're right.
but it's like if there's a policy that says that's policies, like this is how policies are written and they are written gender neutral, then it sounds like all we need to do is make sure that
I
policy
think
is
that would
updated.
be great for the operating norms that we're working on.
Okay.
But I do think at the moment, or at least when we start talking about this, we created the policy that is about gender identity, which is a starting point in a very long process, but the starting point, and we wanted to make sure that our actions in terms of our policies
just in
were aligned with
language.
Yeah. And so that was the minimum we thought we could do. I don't want to speak for Laura. I actually raised my hand because I don't know. Like, I hear that we need a couple words tweaked, but I don't hear a substantial change in the message. And so I don't know if it's something we couldn't just tweak now.
Okay.
Or if we really need another month to think about it, honestly, because I think I don't mind. It's not because I wrote it. If you guys have totally different language you want to insert, I don't care. What I heard was that the message isn't totally changed. There's just some language tweaks, and I don't know why we couldn't do that here. We've done full policies and meetings before. I just hate to waste time because then it's more time that people don't know about it. But if the question is more, how do we let people know about it? That certainly could, take more discussion. So that was my only thought. And I don't know the answer to that. Like, I don't know if we present it to the whole committee, if we could just make a statement, or if then a memo is better, or like, I don't know how the best way to do that, because we've never done anything like this.
Well, I would say that the nice thing about presenting it to the whole committee is that it would be reflected in the minutes and it's recorded. So the public has that information as well, as opposed to just disseminating a memo.
Yeah, but I think the question then, I don't know, because Sherry's here, we can ask what she thinks as the chair would be the best, in the sense of like, is this a statement or a memo? Like either way, I could see in a school committee meeting saying, we're going to read this memo out loud, or we're going to read this statement out loud. Like, I don't know, it might not matter. Doesn't matter. Yeah. So either way. So I mean, I agree, Malaya, that I don't think we're talking about what the content is. We're just talking about a few words here and there.
So it sounds like we should move forward. Okay, it sounds like we've got a few tweaks that are noted in the notes that I've taken in terms of taking out ASAP, in terms of updating chair and vice chair names, and then reading it to the full school committee. The next time we can get it on the agenda, which is ASAP.
Okay, Laura.
Does that sound like the right place that we're landing? Sherry?
I don't think this even needs to go on the agenda. I think it is just part of your committee update.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so the motion was to approve the memo and recommend to management distribution of the memo to all subcommittees. So we're amending the motion. So to approve the memo, to approve the statement to be read to the full committee. Does that sound good?
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yes.
What's the goal? I know we went back and forth on this. Where did we end up? Is the goal to have this committee update the policies or to make changes in the way that policies are redrafted and created in the future, or both?
So my understanding is that we are asking members to, in their normal course of action, in either writing policy or updating policies, to reflect a gender neutral language.
Got it. So it's more than just the ASAP. It's that whole sentence that would need to be updated, I think, in that last paragraph, just throwing that out there. And then the other piece is, Sherry talked about, I think you used the word manual, but I don't really, does that exist? No. Okay.
No,
All right.
we've been talking in bylaws and we've been talking in management about creating some kind of operations guide, manual, something about these little things of how we generally operate, because we have new committee members coming in every 3 years, and we haven't settled on anything yet. So
I actually, after our management meeting, you don't know this yet, but I actually got a whole bunch of information from Dorothy at MASC about what other districts do. So I will share that shortly. It was like an hour after our meeting, of course. So
I just bring it up because that would be a really cool thing to put in the manual if that existed, but I didn't want to lose sight of that. That's all.
So Malia, one of the reasons why we're not putting this on the screen is because my computer is not functional on Google Meets. But you have the editable. I only have a PDF here right now. Do you have the ability to kind of capture the changes that we've discussed here and share that update, or do you just want to resend it to me? Thank you. And do that. Do you want to do that here now? Okay, we lost you, Malia. I see that you put those things in the chat, the links. I still am not going to be able to do that from the resources that I'm using right now.
Laura, do you think we should table this until the next meeting?
Sadly, I feel like we ought to. I just feel like even though it's just tweaks that we're doing, oh my goodness, I am having major technical difficulties tonight. I am so sorry. But yes, I do think that we ought to table this. That was my original, feeling, was that we ought to table this until our next meeting and edit on live and then pass it to be said at the next meeting.
Right. I kind of concur.
Okay. So we're going to table this to a time definite, which would be our next meeting. All right. Is everybody okay with that? Yeah, I don't know, Malia. That's.
Oh, so Malia's having trouble too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So are we, so I'll just do a roll call. Do we have to do a roll call vote for a table? Sherry? I'm sorry.
Yeah, if you're going to postpone, you need to. It's a motion to table.
Motion to table. So Sue, you're going to motion that?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to table this until our next meeting.
Okay, and I will second that. Okay, Deidre?
Shapiro, yes.
Malia? Can you put your, yes. And Sue?
Yes.
And chair votes yes. So we are tabled until our next meeting.
Laura, I
Okay.
have to step away for just a moment.
Yep. All right, my friends. So the next policy, the next item on our agenda is new policy 1030, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I would entertain a motion to recommend the WRSC adopt new policy 1030, policy relating to school committee operations, diversity, equity, and inclusion, pending legal review that may include addition of legal references as necessary.
So moved.
I don't know who that was. Was that you, Deidre?
Yeah, that was Cedar. Sorry,
Okay.
Shapiro.
Thanks. Do I have a second?
Second,
Thank you, Sue.
Valentine.
Yeah, we can't enter into a discussion about it until we pass the motion, I guess, is how this works. So that's why we're kind of doing it this way. So this is a new policy, and if you don't mind, I'd like to speak to this, Deidre, if that's okay. So I did some work. Basically, we hear that the new bylaws may be coming down the pike with fewer subcommittees, right? And so the fact that there's going to be fewer subcommittees, and the discussion was that perhaps the ed subcommittee, diversity subcommittee, and so forth would be reduced, and that more of this work would be done in the full committee. And so this, without having policies in place, I wonder if if this work could be lost. and not formally executed it by the full school committee. And so this policy relating to school committee operations, diversity, equity, and inclusion is one that doesn't currently exist. And the other two that are on the agenda further down are policies as well that that we don't currently have either. So so you know, these are three essentially separate policies. They all kind of say similar things, but they may, you know, it may be, one may be better than the other. But I have no other way than doing this in order to discuss it, as far as I understand. So that's why we're doing it this way.
So Laura, are you thinking that out of all these policies, we'll discuss it and choose the one that we think best meets the needs of the district and our goals?
Yes, that was my my thinking on this. Yes, Sue.
Okay, thank you.
Is the hyperlink working for anybody? It's working for you? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I have to go into the agenda.
Ours
So
is
Laura-
working, but I could not get the MASC pages to open, but I got ours to open.
Okay.
So Laura, my question was, I got the MASC pages to open, Malaya, just now. So my question is kind of like, so I kind of want to, I'm wondering about the history of this. Did you write this based on what you saw on MASC, or?
So
Is
that's a
this-
good question. Yeah.
Yeah.
I started digging into policies, both with MASC, and this policy did not exist on the MASC. This came from a similar policy that was drafted by, let me tell you the source. I thought I had referenced the source. Hold on. So I had found this in the Pelham Union Free School District posted this policy. And then I went to the state DOE and looked at their DEI policies and practices as they've got posted on the website. And I looked at our policy 1000 on non-discrimination and our policy 1020 also on non-discrimination on the basis of disability. And looking at those and looking at those and that we have around you know, using data to drive our equity and inclusion work and identifying, you know, seeking those gaps. I thought this was kind of encapsulating a lot of that work into a policy.
Yeah. So, so just quick glance looking at it, you know, I don't have anything. It just, one of the things that I was wondering though was that, like, I'm trying to remember which subcommittee it was last year. We worked really hard to, and I'm thinking it's education, but for some reason it could have been facilities. But we worked really hard to come up with that definition that goes on the basis of, and then all the things that are listed after that. And the reason why I
Yes.
remember it is because we had a big conversation about pregnancy or pregnancy status, and we're like,
Mhm.
you know what I mean? So
Yep.
like, what I'm wondering is that if we can find that statement that was approved already in you know, in a policy from last year, and just kind of keep using that same one that was already hashed, you know what I mean?
Yes.
So there's consistency from this policy from whatever we approved last year and whatever that policy is.
So you're talking about that first opening paragraph that we're looking at.
Well, that one it's in a couple places actually.
Okay.
But that's kind of where I'm saying it's like kind of like bullying or harassment. No, if you go down to equity gap is actually the first place I see it. Like defining equity gap. And it says observable differences and experiences. I could put my cursor there because you're there,
Yep,
right?
I got it.
Yeah. So this is where it's like on the basis of, and then like that committee last year really hashed out to make sure that this made sense and was what we wanted to say. And I just remember, I think we took out pregnancy status, but there might have been other things that we did. So, I mean, I can do some digging and see if I can figure out what that was that we landed on, if you want.
Well,
But again,
I
I'm
know
just
that
kind of
it's
looking
in,
for consistency.
I know that it's in the policy 1000.
Maybe that's what it was then. Okay.
Yeah. So,
so just to be consistent is what I'm just
yeah,
suggesting
so
there.
you're
That's just
saying
the
make
first
sure
one.
that that's consistent with policy 1000.
Yeah, there we go. Okay. And then the consistency throughout the rest of the document, to look for that consistency. But other than that, I would like some time to take a closer look at this. I saw it when you passed it out to us. I didn't know what I was really looking at, and now that I know the history, I'd like to look a little closer.
Yeah.
Take some more time on it. But
Thank you. Malia?
So I do think we talked about that category a lot in diversity. Maybe it was for policy 1000. So it might have trickled into other things. But that aside, I guess, part of my question about all this was the context. So now I understand the context. All of these are, well, one of them short, but they're fairly complex policies and they encompass a lot of things. I support the message that's in them, but I'm struggling a little bit, and I don't know where this lands, but I'm struggling a little bit with the fact that it kind of feels like, to me, like the district itself hasn't done some of this clarifying. And last year we talked a lot about doing things and taking our time to do things. And I think some of this language maybe was going to come out of discussions that were happening last year and then were put on hold because of a lot of things. And there was going to be a task force or something. I don't really know the status of any of that, but it feels like some of the language, I'm conflicted because the school committee does have its own policies. And I think that I support the general goals and statements in these policies, in all of them. But I also am struggling a little bit because I kind of feel like we're jumping ahead a little bit. Like they're very broad policies and they have a lot of things in them about definitions and things that I think the district hasn't sorted out as a whole. Like I'd love to have a conversation with John and with, maybe Jim, but John could certainly represent the administration in a little more detail to make sure we're all on the same page about going forward and what the district is valuing, and make sure we're in alignment, or at least not in disalignment, if that makes sense. Because these are very broad policies, but I'm also conflicted because I also know the school committee certainly can have their school committee policies. So they don't, they can be separate. And I think on the one hand, it shows our commitment to these things, regardless of anything else, which I think is really important. But on the other hand, I kind of feel like we haven't had a discussion as a subcommittee even about most of these topics and where we stand. Even, I was at the conference last week, and the notion of the equity gap came up, I remember, in two different things as a question about, do we still want to use that language and how is it interpreted? And that was like a 20-minute discussion. So I feel like some of these things in defining so many terms and things, while I agree with their value and that it's an important statement to be made, I'm kind of conflicted because I feel like we haven't maybe had some of the discussions to come to agreement that these are the like, this is the right language. This is what we agree with. This is in line with where the district is going as a whole. Like, I don't know if we need to, but those are my thoughts initially. I'm not sure where that lands, but
Thanks, Malia.
If I could make an observation, when I look at the difference between 3,000 and 310, so the goal is to choose between one of these three, if potentially, correct? Yeah, all right. So when I look at 3,000 and 310, I think of 3,000 more of a statement, and 310 is more action. And particularly when you look at kind of number one, the first part of 3,010, like that's a specific request that actually really dovetails nicely with some of the work that we're already doing, and it would be nice to kind of be able to reference that sometimes. But in general, I that was kind of like a highlight that I had in terms of those two policies. I think 3,010 is a little bit more specific and calls out some really important things that can be done. 1030 is a lot. Now, 1030 might be overwhelming for folks, but I don't know that it's so far off of what we're doing right now. When I look at our MTSS work and I look at our tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 approaches, and our work that we're doing this year with our administrators and what they're doing in their buildings, I'm not sure that this is far off from where they're at. So it is overwhelming, I think, but at first glance. But in terms of the content of each one of these pieces, I don't know if it's too far off from what's already happening. And I say that in a good way.
I'm like nodding because I'm like, wow, that's really nice to hear. You know what I mean? It's good.
We're having some wonderful conversations, and I think, it's almost like a bit of a gift to have, to have a superintendent that we do, number one, but also to kind of have a new team at central office, and whether we have people who have been there or not, like we're a new team together. We've got new administrators and this new sort of commitment to MTSS, and where are we as a district, right? Like that's number one for us is we're still trying to wade through that. And we've got 3 new principals who are trying to wade through what their buildings are, and us working together as an admin team at that level it's been awesome. And like, we're really, the culmination of all of these things kind of coming together, like the new district level team, the new building level teams, and our MTSS work, like it's just lending itself to some really good conversation. And then, like as I said earlier, the data that we can get from Panorama, not just around SEL, but also around climate, and also this platform that we have to look at attendance, behavior, academics, SEL data, all on one platform, and use those different filters. It's been like we're in a good place to continue the work.
That's great. That's great. I think the data is important too. Definitely. That's really good to hear.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Deidre. Emilia, thank you for your insight in there. I'm feeling like as I hear our conversations, I think about what we value as a school committee, being pretty important in driving how we operate and what we devote resources to. And I feel that it's important with the reduction in school committee, in subcommittees. I feel like it's important to kind of institutionalize our commitment and our resources to this work. And so, I would love to see us land somewhere where we can all, feel comfortable and realize that, land in a place where we feel comfortable, but we also feel like aspirationally we can give some direction to the school committee and school committees to come, that yes, this is what we're aspiring to, and yes, this is what we are devoting resources to in this way. So, I'm willing to sort of table this discussion and realize that there's work to be done. Sort of table the vote rather to this policy 1030. And give us some time to do some additional work and discussions, knowing that we have a new team, but also realizing that we have to I feel compelled to make some sort of decision this year before, new subcommittee, the new bylaws take effect, and of course the reduction in the school committee takes effect. So I feel like that's sort of our deadline for me.
So
Laura,
Laura,
can I just,
oh, go ahead, Susan.
I just wanted to ask for a point of clarification because I'm so new to this. So the subcommittees are going to be reduced, and do we know which ones will be eliminated at this point, or we just know that there's a number that they're looking at?
That's a good question. So we have the new regional agreement, which is going to reduce our committee numbers over the next, I think it's 3 years. And then the bylaws are being rewritten, and I don't remember exactly when the presentation was the update was given to us, but a few months ago, Member Lavoie communicated some updates, sort of what their conversations were and where they were, thinking they were going to head. And from that discussion, I heard that management was going to be reduced from a subcommittee, and education and diversity. And the idea that with fewer people with fewer subcommittees, more of that work would be done by the full committee, which of course would be a smaller full committee moving forward. Right, did you hear the same thing? I mean, that's what I heard.
I heard them say that is something they've discussed, but I am hesitant I think we need to move forward with this for other reasons, but I am hesitant to make any decisions with the assumption that this or any other subcommittee will definitely be eliminated until we vote on it. Because honestly, I know a lot of people who had questions. There were enough questions raised that I think it's premature to assume anything. I think they said this is things we've discussed, and nothing is finalized until we all vote on it. So I don't want to assume. Also because I happen to think our work is really important, and I don't think we can know where we're going to land. But I do think it's important for other reasons that you stated to include some of these things. I mean, it's something that if we believe in it and it reflects our values as a district or as a committee, then it certainly is something worth having. I don't want to assume. Because I think they said, this is what we've talked about, this is what we're thinking, but there was no even two-way discussion. There was, send us your thoughts and we'll keep talking and we'll come back to you. So
Malia, I'm on that
you are
ad hoc.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So just to let you know that to let everyone here know, that is the direction that it's going, is that to reduce the number of subcommittees. It was looked at creating a new committee called Policy Committee, and then there would be some redundancy in some of the work that the subcommittees are doing right now regarding policy. Like, so much of the education work committee is policies. We're talking about policies here. The idea is that the policy committee would kind of handle all of those, but one of the things that I said, because again, I'm on this committee and I was like, it's so important, is that we're trying to figure out a way to make a mechanism within what the school committee does on a monthly basis that allows for task force type committees to respond to concerns from the community and students and administration or whoever maybe that brings forward concerns, to be created faster, quicker, easier. Okay, so and I'm trying to remember exactly, the history of how this committee got created in the first place. It was in response to some things that we were hearing actually from the students and around culture and around inclusion and around how the students were feeling. And so that was kind of where this committee kind of came from. And I think like the idea is that with the new bylaws structure, we're trying to figure out a way to make it be so that and we're kind of saying like a task force committee or something, or an ad hoc or whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter, but something that can be reactive and quickly reactive to whatever the issue is at hand, come together, take care of the concern, respond, and then disband because we're going to have less people, to be on like a formal committee like that. But that being said, it hasn't been hashed out yet. It was just a suggestion of how to take care of some of the concerns about the fact that there is going to be less people on the committee, so less kind of leads to less committees in general. So that was kind of that. Does that? But again, like you said, it's all in conversation. It's all in discussion. So as far as this committee and what we're doing here today, is yes, it's important. I think that it's also to kind of like Laura's point though, Malaya, is that like it's not important because we think we're going to get disbanded. It's because it will help shape those bylaws that are also being written, you know what I mean? And to kind of make sure to put this in the forefront. And I feel like thinking about the pace of that ad hoc, kind of feel like there is a little urgency to get this kind of out there sooner than later for that reason to make sure that this kind of is in that ad hoc committee's mind, or type thing. So I don't know if that helps a little. So.
Sherry?
Just to add on to what Deidre said, we talked at one of the bylaws meetings I was at about, is there a timeline? Could some of these things, start sooner rather than later? And yeah, I mean, the thing is, these bylaws recommendations, they can happen anytime, right? They could start now. They could happen 2 years from now. Just because we're talking about reducing subcommittees, it doesn't mean that we have to reduce this subcommittee this year. It could, we're only going to 19 next year. We're not getting down to 16 yet, right? So as much as we could speed this process up, we can also slow it down. And it's at the will of the full committee. So not only is it a discussion of how it happens, but when it happens.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the things that was discussed around that was kind of, the benefits of doing it sooner would be that the people that are on these committees, like us, will still be here next year because we're not reduced, you know what I mean? Like that kind of a thing. But the benefit to doing it later is that the committee that's currently standing, whether it's this one or another one or one of the other ones, can finish the work that they've started. So regardless, whatever it is, it's not going to happen overnight and there will be notice. Like Sherry, I'm saying that with like confidence that we're not going to be like, and you guys no longer exist next month. You know, I mean, I would be like, whoa, no, we can't do that to people, because all these committees are doing work. They're doing good work, you know what I mean? And we need to make sure that the timeline makes sense for everybody for all those reasons. So that's part of it, definitely.
I think that to your point, Deidre, you know, for me, how do I say this? One of these policies, I think, would help inform a direction, formally a direction. And, you know, to circle back to the policy 1030 that we're, you know, is kind of the first one that we're looking at. It intentionally names certain commitments to drive work that goes beyond this subcommittee. As John was saying, like, you know, using data to inform decision making, right? Operationalizes that for this purpose. Using advisory committees, looking at how we are doing, you know, how we're looking at impediments to safe and rigorous learning environments. Like, it's naming the work specifically. And that's one of the reasons why when I read this, I really liked it, because it was naming the work specifically. Like, okay, today we're going to work on number 2, or we're going to work on number 4. And maybe I'm being a little bit too black and white in this whole thing. Like, it might be a blend of a couple of things. But like, in terms of number 5, attracting, recruiting, and developing and retaining staff who are reflective of our students and our region, you know, not just, you know, Holden, not just, you know, Princeton, but the entire region, and making sure that we have people that are in that working with students that reflect that, I think is an important piece. And it names it. It doesn't just say, you know, aspirationally, we're going to create an equitable learning environment, but it names. The reason why I like this one is because it names those certain data points, those certain action items, without being operational. And I know that we've tried to avoid operational, you know, procedures in our policy making. I don't feel like this does that. I feel like this is still operational, still aspirational enough, but still naming certain aspects of the work that are critical to moving the district forward. And so, anyways, I just wanted to add that piece of information.
I think that again, when I kind of like I started off, I was like, whoa, I want to look
Yeah.
at this closer. It's very dense. And I think maybe my concern, and I guess this is maybe, I don't know if this goes back to John or even like Jim or what, is that if we're like writing something in here, and like we talked a little bit about it being contradictory to maybe like other policies, but also are we writing something here that puts a burden on the district in any way? So you're saying take action, okay? And I'm just wondering, like, is there anything that puts a burden on the district that we're not wondering? And one of the things that I'm looking at, I think here was like reducing. So number 3, you talk about reducing language barriers. I mean, I guess the conversation, I guess, with legal would be, could that be interpreted that all of our communications are translated into native language? Well, how many native languages do we have, John, across our district? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. That's a data thing. But I mean, not to put you on the spot to answer that question, but that's what I'm saying is, like, I'm just thinking, I used to work in Lowell 20 years ago, but they had to like translate their school newsletter in something like 12 languages. Because they had that policy to say like everything had to be in native language. So it's 12 different languages in the Lowell school district. You know what I mean? And so I just kind of want to be like, you know, like I don't know, I kind of want to be aware of maybe those things and to think about that a little, to make sure that we're not adding some sort of burden with some of this language, you know.
That's a good question. It does say
know.
reducing. It does say reducing language barriers, not eliminating language barriers.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I'm wondering. I mean, that's
But,
where
yeah.
again, like the lawyers get involved,
Yeah,
you know what I
right.
mean? Or
But it's a
someone
good
else who
point,
can,
right?
yeah, it's like to kind of think about that. You know, attracting, recruiting, developing. I like that one. I think that's really good. But then how do you track that? How do you make sure that all of our recruiting practices are doing that? Like what's, you know,
Yeah, I
like
think
that
that's
kind of
the
a
work,
thing.
right?
Right, right.
Yeah.
You know, so that's kind of what I'm saying is that that's kind of where I'm saying it's really dense. I'd like to look at it closer and kind of maybe like think about
Yeah.
some of those things closer.
Thank you. I'm not sure who had their hand up, so you can rock, paper, scissors. Sherry, Malia.
Sherry did first.
Okay.
So to your point, Deidre, in policies in the past, just at the top where before the numbers, it says WRSDC commits to. We've changed that to be strives to, right? We're going to try to, as much as we want to ensure every case is different in every situation. So maybe a simple language change like that would make it easy enough.
Yeah, something like that. And that's what I'm saying. It's dense. Like, I think we don't have time tonight to go line by line, but I think like if we have some time individually to look at some of these things, we can have another conversation about our concerns, you know, with some of these committing some of these things we're committing to. Yeah.
So being mindful of time, it's 7:25, and it seems like we've got some work to do here with this policy, and in looking at it maybe a little bit more closely, maybe line by line, taking a look at JB as from the MASC policies and JBB, which are also down on the agenda. And tabling those to our next meeting, or moving them to our next agenda. Not really tabling it, I guess, if we've not gotten to them. But I'm willing to kind of hold off on a vote on this, again, tabling it to our next meeting for this motion, and then being able to have a working session where we look at this a little bit more closely and decide how we want to proceed with it. Does that sound good for everybody?
Yeah.
So Laura, can you clarify again? We're looking to add 1030.
Yeah.
But then we're looking at one of these 300s. There's two 300s that we could either take one or the other or combine them. And then there's a 310 that's by itself. Or are you saying 300 and 310 could be?
So let me say
Yeah.
3,000 and 310 do not exist.
Right.
Okay. Right now they are, the MASC has JB, which is equal education opportunities, and
Right.
JBB, which is educational equity. Those are two drafts that exist in the MAS, whatever the acronym is, in terms of policies, right? If we were going to adopt those policies as written, then I would recommend that we renumber them and place them into policies relating to education. If we are doing this policy 1030, then I would say that this is an operational policy, and that's why it would have the 1000 series.
Okay.
Right, just in keeping with our numbering.
Yeah.
So that's a
So
really
you're-
good question, and I'm sorry I wasn't clear in communicating that, but
Mhm.
that's why the difference is, because I think that this policy, which is a new policy, it doesn't exist anywhere except for, like I said, in Pelham, as I saw that.
Right.
This would be one that we would draft and edit to make specific for our
Mhm.
district, right? And align it to our district, aspirations and work, and make that part of our 1000 series. I think that's where it lands best,
Okay.
in my opinion, if we were to adopt this, where the other two seem to be perhaps more education driven, and therefore would end up, if we were to adopt those, in the 3000 series.
Okay, so Amelia, I hold on a second, just to clarify, just kind of, so we're kind of looking at creating two new policies. Is
In my mind, I was
yeah.
thinking one. In my mind, I was thinking one. But where we land on this is entirely, up to where our discussions and then where the full committee goes with our recommendations.
Okay. And then the only other thing that I had quick around that is that if we're making a recommendation of policy relating to education, would that be in our preview as education and not an education committee?
Yeah,
Does
I
it
don't
matter?
know because I
Sherry's
don't know that
saying
we
it doesn't
have an
matter.
operational strategy for this where our committee sort of is an umbrella, like the
Mhm.
lens that we're doing covers facilities, it covers education, it covers,
Okay.
operations. So we've got all these different, through our lens, we've got, tentacles out in all these different, areas.
Okay.
Um,
So
so
we're
I
not
don't
stepping on
know. I don't
anyone's
know where
toes.
that would go. I
Yeah,
don't know
okay.
if we'd recommend it to education to then review and
Sherry's
then
saying
bring it
no.
forward. But Sherry,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
She's just shaking her head. She's like, nah, don't worry about it.
Okay.
Is that what you're saying by your?
No, yeah, it's again, like Laura said, you're the umbrella group.
Okay.
Yeah,
You wouldn't worry
that's
about it.
that's why we bring it to the full committee. If somebody from the full committee thinks it needs to go to education, then that's their decision. But you have every right to bring it to the full committee.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that, Laura.
Malia?
I was just being respectful of time. I was just going to mention that I think some of the numbered elements also may be covered in some other policies, because I believe, for example, I'm pretty sure we do have something about language and ELF families and interpreting things, or that people have the right to see things in their own. I forget what policy it is. So it will give us time to go through some of that too, because some of this may be included in other policies already. And it might be that we want to get rid of them and have this be overarching, or it may be that we're required to have those policies and then we can just refer to them, or, or take pieces out to make it a little shorter.
Yeah.
Some of the things rang a bell, but I did not have time to go through all our policies and cross-reference them all this weekend. So,
Okay. Deidre, would you make the motion to table this to a time definite to our next meeting?
Sure.
Since this was your motion.
Since it was my motion and I still had tons of questions.
Do I have a
so-
second for that?
Second.
Thanks, Sue. Okay. So we'll go through a vote. Malia? Oh, you're muted.
yes.
Okay, thank you. And Sue?
Aye.
And Deidre?
Yeah, Shapiro, yes.
And Laura votes yes. So we are tabling to our next meeting to bring this up and discuss further. So we're skipping over item number Roman numeral 6 and 7. And I'll take new business. Okay, and
I have.
yeah, good.
I don't know how to phrase this, so I apologize. But I have two things. One is that I guess we heard a little bit tonight about what is going on in our schools. I really would love to have more of kind of an update on what is going on in the district, to align our work in some way with it. It doesn't have to be formal, but I don't think we've had that really since, I don't even know, last spring when Brandon was still here, and then he left, and then, we didn't get any more updates because there was a lot going on with all the transitions. So I don't want to create extra work. It doesn't need to be formal, but I think it would be helpful to know some of these things that are going on in our districts. What are our schools doing? What's the general direction the administration and this group is going with some of this work? And I don't know the best way to do that, but I would love to get some kind of an update on that in our discussions, to help kind of guide our work and know how we're all connected. I'm creating panic in John. I'm sorry.
No, not at all. I mean, I think that part of it is I think we all need to understand like that there's a lot of balls up in the air
Mhm.
with a lot of different things. And
Yeah.
I think the MTSS approach and our focus on MTSS, both from the academic and the SEL lens, is our primary focus. And when we're talking with principals and doing our work with our buildings, like that is forefront, but that doesn't mean the other work goes away.
Yeah.
All of this marries really well into it, and it's all part of the same conversation. In addition, I know a lot of work has been happening around like sense of belonging, particularly at the high school. Like that's a big focus for them. And I didn't talk too much, or I didn't really mention it at all, but we're doing a lot of work around restorative justice, and I'd love to be able to talk about that at the next meeting as well, if that was an opportunity. But all of that to say, yeah, I mean, we can always continue that conversation. And I know that I have a principal who really actually wanted to come to this meeting, not this particular night, but he wanted to come and talk about some of the work that he's doing in his building, but we haven't met. And so I told him I've been in contact with him, you know, pretty much every other week about this topic. And so if there's an opportunity for him to come out and present, I think he would love that.
I think that's a great idea.
I think that would be great. That was on our list of goals for the year. So
Yeah.
I think that would be great. So that's number one. And also just things like you talked about, some of the panorama data you're thinking of using or starting to use, or different ways of doing that. You know, it would just be good to know what's going on to try and collect some of this and what the schools are doing. So thank you for that. My second item is one you've all heard before, so I'm sorry to bring it up again, but again, don't know how to do this, but I feel like another piece was, how do we know all this is working? And obviously we have student surveys and things, but I don't think we need a forum, but we haven't invited feedback, or I don't know the best way to do it because it could go either direction. But since we had the big swell of people talking to us before this committee was started and when it first started, we haven't had any follow-up discussions or invited, other than our student reps, opportunities for the public to tell us, you know, are things changing? What do we need to know now versus 2.5 years ago? Kind of what the climate is like now. And I don't know where we go with that. It's not just around racism, so maybe a lot of it's going to come out in the data the district is collecting. I don't know, but I feel like we haven't created a forum or a way for people to share things with us. I don't know if it's something as simple as, you know, looking at the bullying data. Are there things coming in around, you know, DEI issues, or are there, I don't know what the answer is, but I feel like we have a gap there, that we haven't invited them into the conversation to update us in the same way, whether it's in writing or we put an anonymous survey up or we invite them to our meeting. I don't know. But I think there's a need to do that at some point, but I do know that can be positive and negative. That could, depending on how we do it. So I don't have an answer, but I'd like us to think about it.
Thank you. So I've noted those things, and I also have one more thing to add, John, and that goes around with when you brought up restorative justice and the sense of belonging in the SEL work. I recall at the full committee meeting at one point, I think you were doing the presentation, and you mentioned something about a very low score in the growth mindset work, the sense of students having sort of evaluating themselves with a growth mindset. And I'm just wondering if, you know, and maybe this would be part of your update, is if there's any work or direction or any resources that, you know, we can, you know, anything that we can do here in our work that would help, you know, bring that important work forward.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of opportunity to dig into some good data in this work and in this diversity subcommittee. and talk about like what interventions are actually being used. I think part of the problem that we have is just there's just not enough time.
Mhm.
I mean, truly, like when I think about the work that we're doing with our principals, I mean, we've only met like 3 times,
Mhm.
since the beginning of the school year. We meet twice a month, but one of those meetings is business and just different things that come up, and then the other meeting is the curriculum meeting, and we're trying to kind of fit. We're starting from square one in some ways, right? As we've talked about. But every one of these things that we're talking about, whether it's Panorama SEL data, Panorama Student Success Platform, training around that, discipline training, there was a new law update to the discipline laws, actually, that impact our buildings in a pretty significant way. I think I said MTSS, but like all of these things, they take time to discuss and to dig into. And so that's, I think, our biggest challenge. Well, I don't know that that's unique to Wachusett. I think that's every school district's biggest challenge is the resource of time. But
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, sure. And one of my challenges, I'm a linear thinker, and I like things that move in a progression, and this work really doesn't, right? It's really kind of nebulous and amoeba-like, and so it makes me a little uncomfortable sometimes.
That's a good point. Yeah.
All right. Anything else there? Okay. Our next meeting. So I have, if I look at our original draft calendar, we had December 8th, which is a Thursday. I don't know how that lands for people, if that's something that we can do. It's actually the second Thursday of the month of December. It's 3.5 weeks from now. What do you all think about that?
So I'm going to be away that
Mhm.
week, but into the next week. So, but if there's quorum, you know what I mean? Like, just, I don't want to be the one that changes the whole thing if everyone else is okay with that date.
Is there another date that works better for you, like the 15th? Does that work better?
I just want to double check. I mean, I'll be back by then. Just let me double check that one though.
Does anybody else have a problem?
Laura,
Yeah.
I kind of, I mean, I struggle with the 15th because that's also the time of our facilities and security subcommittee, and I haven't been able to go to that one.
Okay.
And I was going to go tonight, but so if we could not double book it, that would be awesome.
Great. I don't see the I don't visually see it.
No,
It's somewhere
I
on
get
a
it.
list, and so it doesn't click into me. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, no worries.
Laura, are you thinking you're going to do Zoom meetings moving forward or Google Meet?
I was hoping that we'd get in person because this is really hard to do, especially if we're digging into a policy. So I'd really like to be in person for our next meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, I am good on the 8th, but I can be good other days too, depending on when people are available.
How does the 20th sound? That's a
Nah,
Tuesday?
too close.
Huh?
Sorry.
No, I mean
Can't
the
do
20th
it.
of December.
Also, my kid's home that week, and so
Okay.
yeah, I might be gone.
Yeah. All right.
He
I'm
likes
just
to go
laughing at
skiing.
Malea's reaction.
He likes to go skiing that week because it's before all the rates go
Gotcha.
up.
Fair enough.
So we go up to New Hampshire usually, but no, I can't 3 days before. No.
Yeah,
Sorry.
got you. Does any other time during that week? I would really like to have you there, Deidre, because we've got,
Yeah, I
we
mean,
want to try and get as many voices on this thing as possible. Would the 6th work for folks?
yeah, that's what I'm wondering. I mean, I can pull it back to, if we could pull it back to the 6th, I would be okay with that. Is
It's a
anyone?
Tuesday.
Yeah.
I'm really sorry. I'm out at a training for Title IX
Okay.
on the 6th. I'm
How
sorry.
about Wednesday? Would that work, Deidre? Or no?
I could do the
7th?
7th. Yeah. Yeah, I'm leaving on the 8th, so.
Oh.
Yeah.
What do
So the
you think?
7th.
I
I'm
took
going
the
to
7th.
advance here.
Mhm.
We're
So the
committing December
Malaya?
7th. Does
7th?
that work okay, Malia? Oh, you're muted.
I don't have anything on my calendar, but I have a feeling I'm missing something, but it's fine. It's not on my calendar, so.
So we win.
So this is top
So we
priority.
win.
What?
I said, so we win.
Yeah, you
For
do.
now, I mean, unless it's like my husband's boss's Christmas party or
Yeah.
something, yeah.
Okay.
This is-
Six,
And then I
six,
might be glad to have a meeting, so.
all right, so
yeah.
that's Wednesday, December 6th. Excuse me, December 7th. Sorry. At 6 o'clock.
Okay, so it is not the 8th, it's now the 7th.
Correct.
Okay.
December 7th at 6 o'clock in person at the Curriculum Center, unless that's booked for something else, and then we'll figure out a location.
It looks open. You should be fine.
Okay, great. All right, my friends.
And our
Yeah.
homework is to
Mhm.
dig into these policies a little bit more and bring our suggestions, basically.
Bring your suggestions,
or
bring
thoughts or
your
whatever.
thoughts. Yep, for sure.
Yep.
Yeah, and then John will bring an update.
And we're going to work on the memo/statement.
Memo.
well.
Well, yep,
Okay.
So
it's gonna be
working.
hard. Yeah.
Will we have the ability to put the policy up on the screen?
Good golly, yes.
I don't know how to do that. I don't do that with business and finance because it's messy. But if someone can do that, that would be great.
I'm sure we'll be able to make that happen.
Yeah. And cross your fingers it doesn't snow.
We've done it before there, so I think that'll
Yeah.
be fine.
Yeah.
All right. Motion to adjourn. I will take one.
Move. I'll move.
I think that's Malia.
Yeah.
You got credit. All right. Deidre, did I hear you say second?
I said yes. I said yes, second.
Okay. Very good. All right. So Sue,
Yes.
Malia,
Yes.
Deidre,
Yep.
and the chair votes yes. We are adjourned at 7:46. Thank you guys so much.
Okay. Thank you.
Night, everybody.
Good night,
Good night.
everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.